Most people believe freezing winters mean no food production. You've been told you need heated greenhouses, expensive row covers, constant monitoring. That belief, a marketing narrative sold by garden centers and reinforced by every beginner's guide you've ever read, costs you $300 to $600 every season. But here's the reality. You don't need any of it. Indigenous peoples across brutal climates grew food for centuries without electricity or plastic, using observation and plant relationships instead of domination and expensive band-aids. This is backwards thinking that keeps you paying and fighting. Let me show you the system they don't want you to see. The garden center wants you to believe cold equals death. That belief costs you $300 to $600 every year in heating bills, greenhouse repairs, and protective infrastructure that fails the moment a hard freeze hits. You're paying for solutions to problems that don't exist if you design correctly. Meanwhile, indigenous communities across USDA Zones 3 through 7 grew staple crops through brutal winters without electricity, without plastic, without daily monitoring, because they observed what survived and designed around it. They didn't fight the cold. They selected plants that use cold as a trigger for flavor, resilience, and continuous production. This is your first leverage point, and it costs nothing but a shift in thinking. Here's what most people miss. Cold, hardy plant selection is not about heroics. It's about choosing varieties whose genetics treat frost as a signal to sweeten, spread, and self-seed. Kale is your foundation crop. After the first hard freeze, kale converts starches to sugars as a natural antifreeze mechanism. The result is sweeter, more tender leaves than anything you'll harvest in July. You're not protecting kale from cold, you're using cold to improve it. Plant it in late summer, and it'll produce through January in Zone 6, through March in Zone 7, year-round in Zone 8 and above. No heat, no covers. Just design that works with plant biology instead of against it. Think about it. The garden center sells you row covers and heating cables because protective infrastructure is profitable. But the reality is simpler and cheaper. You need the right plants in the right places. Mosh, also called corn salad, thrives in freezing soil. It germinates in temperatures as low as 40 degrees Fahrenheit and grows actively through winter, producing tender rosettes of nutty greens when everything else has shut down. Meanwhile, this isn't a niche experiment. It's a proven European winter staple that self-seeds if you let it, returning year after year without replanting. You're not maintaining it, you're harvesting it. Claytonia, miner's lettuce, spreads as living mulch across bare soil, protecting the ground while giving you continuous harvests of mild, succulent leaves. It tolerates hard freezes, self-seeds aggressively, requires zero intervention once established. These plants are doing the work for you while you're inside drinking coffee. Overwintered alliums, garlic and onions planted in fall, establish deep root systems that access moisture and nutrients conventional spring plantings never reach. They sit dormant through the coldest months, then explode into growth the moment temperatures rise in late winter, giving you scapes, greens, and early bulbs weeks before anyone else is planting. You're not fighting for production. You're harvesting while your neighbors are still buying seeds at inflated spring prices. Spinach, planted in September, overwinters as small rosettes and resumes growth in February, producing tender leaves for 8 weeks before bolting. Carrots left in the ground through winter sweeten as starches convert to sugar, giving you the best-tasting roots of the year with zero storage infrastructure. You're using the cold as a refrigerator and a flavor enhancer simultaneously. Here's the reality. These aren't fragile experiments that might work in mild climates. These are staple crops that perform reliably across USDA Zones 4 through 9 because their genetics are designed for cold. You're not gambling. You're selecting plants that survive centuries of winters without human intervention. Meanwhile, the garden center sells you the narrative that you need protection because protective infrastructure generates profit margins. But here's what they don't want you to see. You need the right plants in the right places. That's systems thinking, not marketing. When you start with cold hardy varieties, every other element of your winter garden becomes easier. You're not heating air. You're not covering rows every night. You're harvesting food that wants to grow in freezing temperatures. This is the foundation. Get this right, and everything else falls into place. Now let's talk about placement, because even the hardiest plants need strategic positioning to deliver continuous winter harvests without heat or infrastructure. This is where most people waste their design advantage. They select the right varieties, then plant them in open, exposed ground and wonder why production stalls. But here's the reality. Microclimate design is free thermal engineering. You're not fighting the weather. You're creating pockets of warmth that shift your effective growing zone by 10 to 15 degrees without spending $1 on heating. Here's what most people miss. South-facing walls are your primary heat battery. A brick or stone wall facing south absorbs solar radiation all day and releases it slowly through the night, creating a zone that stays 10 to 15 degrees warmer than open ground just 10 feet away. Plant your kale, mosh, and spinach within 2 feet of that wall, and you've extended your season by 4 to 6 weeks on both ends without any protective infrastructure. Think about it. This isn't theory. This is thermal mass physics working for you while you sleep. Meanwhile, indigenous growers didn't have plastic tunnels. They used terrain, stone walls, and vegetation to engineer microclimates that protected crops through brutal winters. You're doing the same with infrastructure you already have. Your house, your fence, your pathways, repurposed as thermal tools instead of ignored as static features. Dark-colored mulch, stone pathways, and water barrels placed strategically near your beds act as additional thermal mass, absorbing daytime heat and moderating nighttime cold. You're not heating the air. You're designing a system that captures, stores, and releases warmth passively. Windbreaks reduce evaporation and cold stress. A simple fence, hedge, or row of evergreen shrubs on the north and west sides of your beds cuts wind speed by 50 to 70%, reducing moisture loss and preventing wind chill that damages exposed leaves. You're creating a sheltered zone where plants retain water and warmth more efficiently. This is observation replacing intervention. You watch where snow melts first. Those are your warmest zones. You note which beds stay green longest. Those are your best placements for succession plantings. But here's where it gets interesting. Mulch is not just weed suppression. It's insulation. A 3 to 4 inch layer of straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips over your soil creates a thermal buffer that keeps root zones 5 to 10 degrees warmer than bare ground. Your kale and spinach can handle air temperatures in the teens as long as their roots stay protected in stable soil. Mulch delivers that stability while simultaneously feeding the next layer of your system, soil biology. Because here's the reality. Active soil life generates heat. Decomposition is microbial activity, and microbial activity produces warmth from the ground up. When you chop spent plants and drop them in place instead of hauling them to a compost bin, you're creating an ongoing decomposition layer that feeds soil organisms, builds fertility without inputs, and generates low-level heat throughout the winter. Deep-rooted crops, overwintered garlic, onions, perennial herbs, establish root systems that reach 12 to 18 inches down, accessing moisture and thermal stability that shallow-rooted annuals never find. You're not watering through winter because deep roots tap into moisture reserves below the frost line. You're not fertilizing because decomposing mulch feeds the roots directly. Think about it. Every element supports another. Mulch feeds soil. Soil generates warmth. Warmth extends harvest. Walls trap heat. Windbreaks reduce stress. Deep roots access stability. This is design, not heroics. You've stopped fighting winter and started engineering around it. You're not checking air temperature and panicking. You're checking soil temperature and adjusting mulch depth. You're reading your garden as a system of interconnected heat zones, moisture gradients, and biological activity. This is what observation-based design looks like when you stop reacting and start preventing. Once you've designed your microclimates and selected cold-hardy varieties, succession planting becomes your continuous harvest engine. This is where the system shifts from producing food to producing food reliably, week after week, without the boom and bust cycle that leaves you with nothing in late winter. Here's what most people miss. They plant once in fall and hope for the best. Meanwhile, you're planting every 2 to 3 weeks from late summer through mid-fall, creating staggered maturity dates that deliver fresh greens from November through March, instead of a single harvest followed by empty beds. This is scheduling, not luck. You're designing continuous yield the same way indigenous farmers designed crop rotation, by understanding timing and using it as a tool. Start with lettuce and spinach in late August. Plant another round in early September, another in late September, a final round in mid-October. Each planting matures 4 to 6 weeks later, giving you 4 separate harvest windows instead of 1. By the time your first planting is finishing, your second is ready. When your second slows down in January, your third is still producing. Think about it. This is systems thinking applied to the calendar. Mosh and Claytonia, planted in September, will self-seed if you let a few plants bolt in late winter, giving you automatic replanting for next season. You're not buying seeds every year. You're building a self-perpetuating system that improves without external inputs. Now let's talk about polycultures, because this is where observation-based design delivers pest control and space efficiency simultaneously. Plant brassicas, kale, collards, cabbage, alongside alliums, garlic, onions, walking onions, in the same bed. Garlic releases sulfur compounds that repel aphids and cabbage moths, the 2 primary pests that attack brassicas in shoulder seasons. You're not spraying. You're designing pest deterrents into the layout. Meanwhile, kale and collards grow tall, providing wind protection and shade for lower-growing greens like mosh and spinach. You're not staking or supporting anything. The plants are supporting each other. This is how indigenous polycultures worked for centuries without chemical inputs. But here's the reality. The Three Sisters system, corn, beans, squash, wasn't about aesthetics. It was about functional relationships. Corn provided structure, beans fixed nitrogen, squash shaded the soil and deterred pests. Every plant had a role that supported the others. You're doing the same in winter beds. Garlic deters pests. Kale provides windbreak. Mosh spreads as living mulch. Spinach fills gaps. Each species contributes to the stability and productivity of the whole system. Alliums have shallow roots that occupy the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. Brassicas root deeper, 8 to 12 inches, accessing different nutrient and moisture layers. You're not competing for resources. You're stacking functions in the same footprint. This is observation-based design, not guesswork. Here's where it gets interesting. Your garden starts managing itself. Once you've established these relationships and tested which varieties handle your specific microclimates best, you save seed from your top performers. The kale that survived your coldest January. The mash that self-seeded most aggressively. The spinach that didn't bolt until March. You're selecting for adaptation, creating varieties that are fine-tuned to your soil, your weather patterns, your exact conditions. Every generation gets tougher, more reliable, more productive. Meanwhile, you're not buying new seed every spring. You're building a living seed library that improves year over year without any external input. This is the shift from gardener to systems operator. You're no longer reacting to problems. You're designing relationships that prevent problems before they appear. You're not fighting pests because your layout deters them. You're not watering because your deep-rooted crops and mulch layers retain moisture. You're not fertilizing because your chop and drop system builds fertility in place. You're not buying seeds because your best plants reseed themselves. You're not maintaining infrastructure because you never built infrastructure that needs maintaining. Every element supports the others. The system regulates itself. Your time commitment drops to 20 minutes per week. A quick harvest on Saturday, a visual check for gaps that need filling. Maybe a mulch top-up if wind has exposed soil. That's it. No weekend shifts fighting weeds or pests. No daily watering routines. No emergency runs to the garden center for expensive fixes. Imagine it's January. Snow covers the ground. Your neighbors are buying shipped lettuce from California at $4 per bag. Greens that were harvested a week ago, trucked across the country, stored under lights. Meanwhile, you're outside in a coat, brushing snow off kale leaves, harvesting sweet, frost-kissed greens that taste better than anything in a supermarket because cold improved them, not degraded them. No heat bill, no greenhouse repairs, no daily maintenance routines, just 20 minutes of harvesting and you're done for the week. This is what design looks like when you stop fighting winter and start working with it. That's what systems thinking looks like. Stop gardening backwards. Start designing forward.